before we get into this thing, I want to let y'all know Kevin Stefanski did his world famous morning press conference, which we're going to listen to. I know y'all don't like it, but this is where the content is, bro. Got to give y'all real news, not just my opinions, but what he actually said. Now, with that being said, you would think with Shedeur Sanders being the second string quarterback, he'll be getting first team reps. Well, I'm here to tell you, Kevin Stefanski just stamped that he ain't, which is a shock to me, and it should be a shock to everyone else because it furthermore, explain to me that Kevin don't like 12.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we're grinding to hit that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and every single subscription gets us closer to that goal. Your support means everything, so if you enjoy the content, smash that subscribe button and stick around because we've got some absolutely wild NFL drama to break down today. Let's jump right into it. The Cleveland Browns are in complete meltdown mode right now, and we need to talk about what's happening with Shedeur Sanders because this situation has gotten absolutely out of control. We're watching one of the most bizarre quarterback controversies in recent NFL history unfold in real time, and somehow it keeps getting worse. The dysfunction, the desperation, the drama, it's all reaching levels that even Browns fans probably didn't think were possible, and that's saying something for this franchise. So let's set the stage here. The Browns are sitting at 2 wins and 5 losses, and honestly, that record is generous considering how bad this team actually looks when you watch them play. This season has been a complete disaster from start to finish, but the craziest part isn't even the losing. It's this never-ending quarterback carousel that just keeps spinning faster and faster. Joe Flacco got benched and then traded. They brought in rookies Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, and somehow Sanders, the 5th-round pick out of Colorado, who everyone thought would be starting by now, is still the 3rd-string quarterback. Head coach Kevin Stefanski recently announced that Sanders would move up to backup quarterback, but here's where it gets absolutely ridiculous. Sanders still isn't getting first-team practice reps. Think about that for a second. The backup quarterback doesn't even practice with the starting offense. Only Dillon Gabriel gets those first-team reps because the coaching staff says they want to aid the young quarterback's development. This decision has completely baffled Browns fans and NFL analysts across the board because nobody can figure out what the actual plan is for Sanders. But it gets even more bizarre than that. When Sanders was asked about his role as the 3rd-string quarterback in the locker room, he literally mouthed his answer silently. He refused to speak audibly to reporters, and instead just mouthed his responses with what witnesses described as his signature smile, followed by a shrug. If that doesn't perfectly capture the dysfunction happening in Cleveland right now, nothing will. The Shedeur Sanders saga has turned into one of the most confusing quarterback situations we've seen in years. This is a player who was legitimately considered a candidate to be the #1 overall pick in the draft at one point. Sanders suffered this unprecedented slide all the way into the 5th round, which shocked the entire football world when it happened. His father, Hall of Famer and Colorado head coach Deion Sanders, even revealed that Shedeur turned down both the Philadelphia Eagles and Baltimore Ravens during the draft, presumably because landing with the Browns looked like it would give him the quickest path to actually starting in the NFL. The irony is just overwhelming. Here we are 7 weeks into the season, and Sanders hasn't taken a single meaningful snap. According to sources close to the team, Sanders may not even play this season unless Gabriel's performance declines significantly. For a player who thought he was getting a fast track to starting, this has to be incredibly frustrating to deal with. Now, the reasoning behind keeping Sanders as the 3rd-string quarterback actually does make some sense from a strategic standpoint, even though it looks completely insane from the outside looking in. The Browns say they want Sanders to be successful when he eventually gets on the field, and they want him playing with a game plan specifically built for his strengths rather than just throwing him into a system designed for someone else. The offensive scheme currently installed is specifically tailored to Dillon Gabriel's unique skill set as a shorter, mobile, left-handed quarterback from Oregon. Throwing Sanders into that system without proper preparation would be setting him up to fail. But here's where the logic breaks down completely. The Browns have created a situation where they have 2 rookie quarterbacks, neither of whom seems to be the long-term answer, and an offense that's ranked 30th in the entire NFL. The team is averaging just 16.1 points per game, and that number has dropped all the way down to a pathetic 10.6 over the last 3 games with Gabriel under center. We're talking about back-to-back games with 0 touchdowns. Not 1 touchdown. That's not just bad, that's historically terrible for an NFL offense. Gabriel himself has been a massive disappointment since taking over as the starter. In the loss to Pittsburgh, Gabriel barely eclipsed 200 passing yards on 29 of 52 passing attempts. That's a completion percentage of just over 55%, which is absolutely abysmal for a starting NFL quarterback. He's been sacked repeatedly, and the offense has looked completely lifeless under his leadership. Yet somehow, some way, Sanders still can't get on the field. Even more shocking is what's happening at practice. According to ESPN Cleveland's Tony Rizzo, Sanders isn't even running the scout team at practice, with Bailey Zappe apparently handling those responsibilities instead. Let that sink in for a moment. The Browns have a 5th-round pick who was once projected as potential first-round talent, and they're not letting him practice with the first team. They're not letting him be the backup in actual games, and they're not even letting him run the scout team in practice. What exactly is the point of having him on the roster at this stage? The frustration is absolutely palpable at this point, and it's not just coming from Sanders. Superstar defensive end Myles Garrett, who's the team's best player and their highest paid defender, has been openly expressing his discontent with how this entire season has unfolded after the Browns lost to Pittsburgh. When reporters asked Garrett about watching Pittsburgh's pass rushers get after the quarterback with a 2-score lead, Garrett simply told them, "Must be nice." That's about as passive-aggressive as you can possibly get in professional football. Garrett had just 1 tackle in that loss, and the Browns played from behind the entire afternoon in Pittsburgh. The defensive superstar is clearly fed up with watching his team's offense fail week after week after week. After the game, Garrett said that losing the same way every single time is frustrating as hell. These are exactly the kinds of comments that signal a locker room starting to fracture and fall apart, and they should be setting off major alarm bells for everyone in the Browns organization. Remember, Garrett requested a trade back on February 3rd of this year, citing a desire to win after Cleveland finished with a 3-14 record last season. The Browns eventually agreed to a 4-year, $160 million extension on March 9th with $123.5 million guaranteed. That extension also included a no-trade clause, keeping him with the Browns through the 2030 NFL season. So Garrett signed up to stay in Cleveland with the explicit promise that things would get significantly better, and instead they've arguably gotten even worse than before. The defense has been the only bright spot for this Browns team all season long, and yet even that unit is starting to show some serious cracks. The lack of offensive production means the defense is constantly on the field, constantly trying to keep games competitive and close, and constantly watching all their efforts go completely to waste because the offense simply cannot score points. It's a recipe for absolute disaster, and Garrett's public comments suggest that players throughout the locker room are reaching their breaking point. But here's where this already wild story takes an absolutely insane turn. Enter Garrett Wilson, the 25-year-old star wide receiver for the winless New York Jets. Wilson recently received a 4-year, $130 million contract extension with the Jets in the offseason, and he's been remarkably consistent in New York despite constant chaos and turmoil at the quarterback position, posting 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons in his first 3 years in the league. However, with the Jets being the only winless team left in the NFL at 0-7, speculation is absolutely mounting that the organization could be sellers at the trade deadline coming up on November 4th. Wilson was seen looking visibly frustrated on the sideline during recent games, and footage showed him appearing to have completely had enough with the Jets organization, despite Wilson previously expressing his love for New York and saying these people have bought into him since he was a college kid and this is where he wants to be. The constant losing has clearly taken a massive toll. Now here's where the Browns enter the picture in a big way. According to ESPN Cleveland's Tony Rizzo, the Browns are actively looking for wide receivers right now, and Garrett Wilson's name has definitely come up in those conversations. Rizzo made his feelings abundantly clear on this topic, stating that he would personally drive to New York to get Wilson if he could. That's about as strong an endorsement as you can possibly get from a local media insider who covers the team daily. The logic behind a potential Wilson trade actually does make some sense, at least when you look at it on paper. The Browns are reportedly targeting players who are on long-term deals, and with Wilson's contract running all the way through 2030, he fits exactly what general manager Andrew Berry is supposedly looking for. The talented wide receiver would immediately become the Browns' best pass catcher by a significant margin and would give whoever ends up playing quarterback an actual legitimate weapon to throw the football to. The current receiving core has been beyond disappointing this season, and the Browns desperately need playmakers on offense. Rookie tight end. Blake Whiteheart has been emerging as a versatile force who can create separation, and the film shows how much Cleveland's offense uses him all over the field in different ways. But one productive rookie tight end isn't nearly enough to carry an entire NFL offense in 2025. Pairing Wilson with Jerry Jeudy would give the Browns rookie quarterbacks two legitimate threats on the outside, while simultaneously opening up space underneath for the tight end and running backs to operate. But here's where things get absolutely bonkers with this whole situation. During a recent radio appearance on 92.3 The Fan, Browns reporter Mary Kay Cabot was asked about whether she would trade Shedeur Sanders if it meant getting Garrett Wilson in return. The very fact that this question is even being seriously asked tells you absolutely everything you need to know about how little confidence people have in Sanders' future with this organization. Cabot responded that the Browns are continuing to bring Shedeur Sanders along slowly, and they're really excited about what they're seeing from him in practice, so they're not going to trade him away before they actually know what they have in him as a player. Let me get this straight here. The Browns are supposedly excited about Sanders and desperately want to see what they have in him, but they won't let him practice with the first team offense. They won't make him the backup quarterback in games, and they won't even let him run the scout team in practice. The cognitive dissonance here is absolutely staggering and makes zero sense whatsoever. Either you believe in Sanders as a potential franchise quarterback or you don't. You absolutely cannot have it both ways in this situation. The plot thickens even further when you consider that an old tweet from Wilson about Sanders recently resurfaced on social media. Wilson wrote back on September 2nd of 2023 that Shedeur is one of them ones at quarterback, and everything looks easy when he plays. Several fans dug up Wilson's old tweet and immediately used it to fuel the trade speculation fires on social media, with people speculating that Wilson would absolutely love to play with Sanders rather than Gabriel. The existing connection between these two players adds yet another fascinating wrinkle to this already incredibly complicated situation. Now let's talk about the actual practicality of making this trade happen in reality. First and foremost, the Jets just paid Wilson $130 million. That's not the kind of money you hand out to a player you're planning to trade away just a few months later. The Jets clearly view Wilson as a cornerstone piece of their franchise moving forward, even if literally everything else is completely falling apart around him. Wilson has been remarkably consistent in New York despite constant turmoil at the quarterback position, which means he's definitively proven he can produce at a high level regardless of who's throwing him the football. But desperate teams do desperate things when their backs are against the wall, and the Jets are about as desperate as it possibly gets right now. They're completely winless, their season is effectively over already, and they're almost certainly heading into a complete organizational rebuild. If another team comes calling with a truly massive offer that includes significant draft capital, could the Jets' stance on trading Wilson actually change? It's definitely not impossible, especially if they believe they can get multiple premium draft picks in return that would accelerate their rebuild. For the Browns, the cost would be absolutely substantial. Wilson wouldn't come cheap under any circumstances, and the Browns would likely need to give up significant future assets to make it happen. However, the Browns do have quite a few picks at their disposal right now, including Jacksonville's 2026 first-round pick that they acquired in an earlier trade. The major question becomes whether general manager Andrew Berry actually wants to part with those incredibly valuable assets for a wide receiver when the team still hasn't figured out the most important position on the field, which is quarterback. Logically speaking, trading for a superstar wide receiver when you have two completely unproven rookie quarterbacks and absolutely no clear answer at the position seems completely backwards. The move would theoretically allow head coach Kevin Stefanski and general manager Andrew Berry to conduct what they would call a thorough evaluation of both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders for the remainder of this season. But is that really worth mortgaging significant portions of the franchise's future? The Browns have been down this exact road before, and it didn't end well. This wouldn't be the first time they traded for a star wide receiver in his prime, as they previously acquired Odell Beckham Jr. from the Giants. That experiment was an unmitigated disaster. Beckham never came remotely close to replicating his Giants' success while in Cleveland. He dealt with multiple injuries, he caused significant locker room drama, and he eventually got released by the team. The Browns' track record with big-name acquisitions is about as bad as their track record with quarterback development over the past 2 decades. But here's what makes this particular situation different and potentially even worse than the Beckham situation. At least when the Browns traded for Odell Beckham Jr., they had Baker Mayfield under center, who was a young quarterback that had just set the rookie touchdown record and shown legitimate promise as a potential franchise guy. That trade also happened in the offseason, which gave everyone involved time to build chemistry and install an offensive system around the new pieces. This potential Wilson trade would be happening right in the middle of the season with a rookie quarterback under center who hasn't consistently shown he can move the ball effectively, and another rookie sitting behind him who the team apparently doesn't trust enough to even let practice with the starting offense. The optics of trading for Wilson while simultaneously keeping Sanders permanently glued to the bench would be absolutely horrendous from a public relations standpoint. Think about this from Sanders' perspective for just a moment. You're a 5th-round pick who once projected as a legitimate potential franchise quarterback. You specifically chose Cleveland because you genuinely thought you'd have a real chance to start and prove yourself. Instead, you're completely stuck as the 3rd-string quarterback, not getting any meaningful practice reps whatsoever, watching the offense struggle miserably week after week. And now the team is potentially going to trade away valuable future assets for a wide receiver instead of simply giving you an opportunity to prove what you can do on the field. That's absolutely brutal treatment for any young player. The timing of all this drama is particularly fascinating because the NFL trade deadline is rapidly approaching on November 4th, which means we're going to get definitive answers very soon about what the Browns actually plan to do. Multiple media outlets have directly linked the Browns to Wilson over the past couple of weeks, and the speculation is only intensifying as both franchises continue to struggle badly. Let's not forget about the rest of the rookie class that the Browns actually drafted this year. Running back Quinshon Judkins hit the ground running in his first 2 games and already leads all rookie running backs in total rushing yards. Linebacker Carson Schwezinger is all over the field making plays and getting widespread recognition as one of the top rookies in this year's overall draft class. Defensive lineman Aiden Hutchinson has been an impressive success story in his time with the Browns so far. The rookie class genuinely looks promising for the future, which makes the quarterback situation even more frustrating to watch unfold. The Browns' 2025 NFL draft class potentially has 4 long-term starters already, with a legitimate chance that one of the quarterbacks eventually joins that list. But how exactly is Sanders supposed to join that list of successful starters when he literally can't get on the field under any circumstances? The Browns traded down from the 2nd overall pick in the draft, passing on generational prospects like Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter to acquire additional picks from Jacksonville that supposedly offered significantly more overall value. That trade has actually worked out brilliantly in terms of the individual players they've acquired with those picks, but the quarterback situation remains an absolute unresolved mess. Speaking of that trade, turning the pick that would have been Travis Hunter into 2 high-quality starters in different positions, plus a first-round pick in 2026, could legitimately make that trade down from the 2nd overall selection, the exact point at which the entire fate of this franchise started to turn around for the better. But absolutely none of that matters at all if they can't figure out the most important position in all of professional sports. The Browns' offensive struggles have been extensively well documented all season long, and they're only getting progressively worse as weeks go by. The passing game is ranked among the absolute worst in the entire league by virtually every meaningful metric. The Browns have the 3rd fewest passing yards per game at only 178.3. They have the 2nd fewest passing touchdowns in the NFL, with only 6 total through 7 games. These are historically bad numbers for any NFL offense, and something drastic has to change immediately. The defense, meanwhile, continues doing its job to the best of its ability despite receiving absolutely minimal help from the offensive side of the ball. Myles Garrett, when he's healthy and properly motivated, remains one of the most dominant defensive players in all of football. But even Superman himself can only do so much when the offense is this fundamentally dysfunctional and unable to stay on the field. The frustration throughout the organization is clearly building to dangerous levels, and eventually something major is going to break. So what's the actual solution here? Does Kevin Stefanski finally give Shedeur Sanders a legitimate chance to start and see what he can actually do with real game reps? Do they make a panic move and trade significant assets for Garrett Wilson, desperately hoping that adding one superstar receiver will somehow magically fix all the underlying problems? Do they stubbornly stay the course with Dillon Gabriel as the starter and just hope he somehow figures things out? None of these options seem particularly appealing given how this entire season has played out so far. The most logical move at this point would probably be giving Sanders an actual opportunity to start after the team's upcoming bye week. Browns insider Tony Rizzo has speculated that if Gabriel continues struggling, it's definitely possible the team could use the bye week to properly prepare Sanders for his first career NFL start. That would give the coaching staff adequate time to install offensive concepts that specifically play to Sanders' individual strengths rather than Gabriel's completely different skill set, and it would finally answer the burning question of what they actually have in their 5th round pick. But logic hasn't exactly been the Browns' strong suit this season, has it? This is the exact same organization that inexplicably kept Bailey Zappe ahead of Sanders on the depth chart and in practice. The same team that traded away valuable pieces right as the season was spiraling completely out of control. The same franchise that has cycled through more starting quarterbacks than most teams go through in an entire decade. The Garrett Wilson trade rumors simply add yet another chaotic layer to an already impossibly chaotic situation that keeps getting worse. If the Browns actually do pull the trigger on a Wilson trade, he just recently inked a 4-year contract worth $130 million that keeps him under contract through his age 30 season in 2030. That deal doesn't actually kick in until 2027, which theoretically makes the trade somewhat more financially feasible for Cleveland. The Browns will almost certainly need to restructure Deshaun Watson's contract yet again to reduce his absolutely massive $80.7 million salary cap hit next season. Oh, right? We haven't even properly talked about the Deshaun Watson disaster yet, have we? That's an entire separate can of worms that continues haunting this franchise every single day. The absolutely massive contract they gave Watson has completely handcuffed the organization financially, making it extremely difficult to build a genuinely competitive roster around him. And now with Watson not even on the field anymore and the team desperately cycling through unproven rookie quarterbacks, that contract looks even worse in hindsight than anyone could have possibly imagined. The broader question that absolutely needs to be asked at this point is whether this current Browns regime of head coach Kevin Stefanski and general manager Andrew Berry can actually survive another completely disastrous season. Myles Garrett's increasingly public comments could very well force owner Jimmy Haslam's hand regarding both Stefanski and Berry's future with the organization, when your absolute best player, the guy you just gave $160 million to keep around, is openly questioning the direction of the entire franchise in media interviews. That's a massive red flag that simply cannot be ignored by ownership. The situation has become so dire and desperate that ESPN's Stephen A. Smith recently predicted that unless Dillon Gabriel suddenly plays lights-out football and Cleveland is legitimately challenging for a postseason berth, we can fully expect to see Shedeur Sanders taking over around week 12 or 13. Smith added that he thinks it's ridiculous that Sanders is still the number 3 quarterback at this point, and it sends completely the wrong message to everyone watching. When Stephen A. Smith is making significantly more sense than your actual coaching staff, you know there's a serious fundamental problem with the organization. The tragic irony in all of this chaos is that the Browns actually do have legitimate pieces in place to be competitive right now. The defense is absolutely loaded with elite talent across multiple positions. The rookie class looks potentially filled with future stars. They have valuable draft capital for the future, but absolutely none of that matters when you can't score points and you can't figure out the quarterback position. And right now, the Browns can't do either of those critically important things. The Garrett Wilson trade represents a pure desperation move from a desperate franchise that's completely out of answers. It's the Browns trying to put a tiny band-aid on a massive bullet wound, desperately hoping that adding one single elite player will somehow paper over all the fundamental structural problems with this roster and coaching staff. Will it actually work? History very strongly suggests probably not. The Browns have tried this exact approach before with Odell Beckham Jr. and various other big-name acquisitions, and it's never worked out remotely close to the way they hoped it would. But here's the thing about desperate teams in desperate situations. They make desperate moves because they feel like they have absolutely no other choice, and the Browns are nothing if not desperate right now. With the trade deadline rapidly approaching, with Myles Garrett openly questioning the team's direction in public forums, with the offense completely unable to function at even a basic level, and with a quarterback situation that makes absolutely zero sense to anyone outside the building, something major has to give very soon. Whether that something is finally playing Shedeur Sanders, trading significant assets for Garrett Wilson, or somehow doing both simultaneously, we're all going to find out the answers very soon. The most realistically likely scenario is probably that the Browns just continue to muddle through this season with Gabriel starting, Sanders watching helplessly from the sideline, and the offense remaining completely anemic. They probably won't actually make a blockbuster trade for Wilson because that would require the Jets to genuinely be willing to trade him, which seems highly unlikely despite all their losing. Instead, the Browns will likely finish with somewhere between 4 and 6 total wins, miss the playoffs again for yet another year, and we'll all be right back here next offseason debating whether they should draft yet another quarterback with one of their multiple first-round picks. The quarterback position in Cleveland has been legitimately cursed for literal decades now. From Bernie Kosar to Tim Couch to Brady Quinn to Johnny Manziel to Baker Mayfield to Deshaun Watson and now to this complete mess with Gabriel and Sanders. The Browns have never been able to figure it out, and based on how they're currently handling Shedeur Sanders, it doesn't look like they're any closer to actually solving this puzzle than they were 20 years ago. So where does all of this leave us at the end of the day? The Browns are 2-5 with one of the absolute worst offenses in professional football. Shedeur Sanders remains the third-string quarterback despite being arguably more talented than both players ahead of him on the depth chart. Myles Garrett is clearly frustrated and making his displeasure known publicly to anyone who will listen. The rookie class looks genuinely promising, but is being completely wasted on a team that can't score. And now, absolutely wild trade rumors involving Garrett Wilson are swirling everywhere as the deadline rapidly approaches. It's complete and total chaos in Cleveland, but honestly, would any of us really expect anything less from the Browns at this point? This is a franchise that has perfected the art of dysfunction over decades, and this season is just another chapter in that long, painful story.